Hello, everyone. Welcome into the Fantasy Roundup. I'm your host, Spencer the Guru Urquhart. Alongside me is Gabe Henderson. Thanks, everyone, for rocking with us here. This post-Christmas episode. How was your Christmas, Gabe?
It was pretty good, Spencer. Got to watch some good football games, enjoy some
Yeah.
fantasy victories, and as always, spend time with family and open some presents. How was yours?
Yeah, about the same. I thought I was heartbroken Monday night. I thought I had got knocked out of one of my big leagues, but I check again today. Stat correction. Your boy's in the chip now, thanks to the stat correction. It wasn't pretty. It was one of those ones that came down to less than a point, but luckily it swung in my favor here late. The dude I was playing, not happy, but I mean, hey, you just never know what can happen. I've been on the butt end of those where I get heartbroken, so it's about time one actually swings in my favor, I feel like.
Yeah, there we go. I mean, my most notable stat correction was I thought I was on the losing end of David Johnson's breakout 45-point game a few years ago in a playoff game, and ended up benefiting because of stat correction. So I know how you feel there.
Yep, for sure. And so for those tuning in, I'm sure if you're tuning in, you're probably in your fantasy football championship. So for those on it's still alive, trying to get these championships, make sure to get your questions in. We're going to have our Q&A segment here at the end. Going to have go over our league winners, players that we feel are going to be league winners this week to get you those titles. And we've also got a live Q&A, break down the latest news. Going to talk about the listener league. Hank Trill, what up, bro? I know he's looking forward to that listener league segment. So let's get into our headlines, though, before we do that. Our latest fantasy football headlines. The Broncos have benched Russell Wilson and are going to start Jarrett Stidham the last 2 weeks. This was due to a contract more so than performance. Russ had been pretty solid as a starter this year under Sean Payton, but apparently Sean Payton didn't like him because he is going to be benched and not expected to return as Denver's starting QB next season. We'll have more on that here in just a little bit. The Vikings have benched Nick Mullins for rookie Jaren Hall. Jaren Hall will be the fourth guy now to start at QB for the Vikings. It's been a mess there in Minnesota. They're still alive, though, for the playoffs. Their season's on the line, putting it in the rookies' hands. Interesting decision there from Kevin O'Connell. Still have Joshua Dobbs on the roster, but decided not to turn back to the Pastronaut. And more bad news for the Vikings. TJ Hawkinson is done for the year, torn ACL. Might miss part of next season. Hopefully not, but bad break there for Hawkinson. He is Dunzo, season-ending IR for him. And then Amari Cooper, y'all, for those that have Amari Cooper, he's questionable for tonight on Thursday Night Football. He's got a heel injury after his huge 200-yard game, over 200 yards, like 50 fantasy points. By far his best game of the year, one of the best games of his career. He's been known for those blow-up kind of games, Gabe, but that was his career best outing. So tonight, man, do you start him or not? I probably still would if he's a go, but it's a tough matchup and he's banged up.
Yeah, after his performance last week, albeit against what I consider to be a relatively practice squad-filled secondary with the Texans, he's almost a must-start, especially, considering his importance to that offense and Joe Flacco's tendency to air it out over the last few weeks.
Yeah, he's definitely a go-to there, and offense is really taking a turn for the better with Joe Flacco as far as being actually a pass-friendly offense. We were hoping for that with Deshaun Watson. It never really materialized, but lo and behold, Joe Flacco saving the day there in Cleveland. So it just goes to show you never know what can happen in this crazy league known as the NFL, and it makes our fantasy matches pretty unpredictable as a result. But let's talk about this Russell Wilson stuff here before we get into our league winners for this week 17. And then for those that have questions, get them in now, and we'll get to our Q&A segment here in a little bit. But Russ he's done, y'all. He's done. Bench for the last 2 weeks. Expected to be cut after the season. So it's just, man, I was very shocked by this. I did not expect Sean Payton to want to move on from Russ this soon. I thought he was going to give him at least another season, considering he's been improving throughout the season. So I'll put it like this. Unless Sean Payton's already got a name in mind as his next QB, which he probably does if he's making his decision this far ahead. But if he's just doing this for personal bias reasons, just because he doesn't like Russ personally, then to me, he's really making a bad decision here, because Russ is someone that is good enough to, if you've got a good defense, he'll get you some wins. But he's not an elite QB anymore, but he's still good enough to win you football games. So to me, this is a risky decision. It might be the right one if he's got someone in mind, but I don't know if I trust Sean Payton. He didn't really handle the post Drew Brees thing very well. So I'm gonna go out on a limb. I know people love to hate on Russ, but I think Payton, and he could prove me wrong, but I think Payton's kind of jumping the gun here. If I was him, I'd have held him at least one more year.
Here's the thing, Spencer. I mean, this is a financial decision all the way from the Broncos. And, while I agree, I think they're going to downgrade next season over what you get from Russell Wilson. I think for the dollar, you're going to get a better quarterback. I think even if you stick with Jarrett Stidham for a year, for what he's making compared to what Russell Wilson is making, the difference is too minimal. Russell Wilson's just been a guy who, over the last few seasons in Denver, has gone through the motions. You can blame the offensive line. You can blame the receiving core. You can blame the running game. They've got weapons at every level, He just hasn't done enough to get the job done there. And if you're Sean Payton and the Broncos, you've got to look at this and say he is not performing at the level that his contract says he should be. So while I agree that, as I said, the next person is going to be a downgrade, you're almost in a position to where you're paying him too much to where it would almost handicap you in a way where you couldn't improve your team elsewhere if you were to keep him.
For sure. Yeah, maybe what they're thinking is that they'll cut him, suck really bad next year, and take a QB first in 2025. But that's always such a risky proposition, because you never know like how a team's going to respond to that. I mean, look at Tampa Bay. They basically stripped it down thinking they were going to suck this year, but they're probably going to make the playoffs now. They brought in Baker Mayfield cheap, and he's at a resurgence. So you try to do stuff like that, and you never know what can happen. So maybe he's got a guy in mind. Maybe he's had talks with like Kirk Cousins or someone like that, another veteran type QB that's going to come in, and then they'll probably draft someone eventually. But for next year, to me, he needs to upgrade Russ. If he goes into next year with Jarrett Stidham, to me, he's failed. Like, unless he's got a plan in place to upgrade Russ, this was silly, because I feel like he could have still gotten out of it. He's going to save some next year by cutting him, but he's still got to eat. I think it's like $30 million. It would have been like $60 million, I think, had he kept him. So definitely saving money by cutting him, but now you don't have him on the roster. So unless you can bring in someone to match, or, well, in this case, improve his production, I just feel like Sean Payton's kind of desperate at this point, and he's desperate to prove he can do it outside of the Saints. And I think there's a chance he might crash. He might just crash and burn. Maybe he'll prove me wrong. He proved the doubters wrong with the Saints. He led the Saints all the way to the promised land, but I don't know. This Denver thing, I'm skeptical. We'll see how it ends up, though.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. I don't know what direction they'll go in. Obviously, as you said, Sean Payton's got something in mind, but that $30 million or whatever that they're saving is going to be huge when they're building around the quarterback, whoever it is, not Russ anymore, going forward.
Yeah, and Hank's right about Seattle fleeced Denver on the Russ trade. Boy, did they fleece him. Payton, to be fair to Payton, he wasn't with Denver at that point, so he's cleaning up the mess of the previous regime. So to answer the question, though, about what this means for fantasy, I don't think this changes a whole lot. I don't think Stidham's that much of a downgrade for fantasy, as we saw last year. A similar script with the Raiders when Derek Carr got benched for financial reasons, who was the backup, Jarrett Stidham. And he's in the same situation this year, so he'll get a couple starts. And I think he'll end up doing about the same. It's not like Russ was really lighting it up. And I think, though, this helps. This hurts Sutton and Judy because they're used to having the chemistry with Russ. But I think this helps a guy like Marvin Mims, the rookie. I think he could be a sleeper here. I know it's just 1 week. Well, some people have 2 weeks. Some people go into week 18. But for those in super deep leagues, I think Marvin Mims is a solid dart throw because they get a good matchup too against the Chargers.
Yeah, I think another one or two people who benefit are the running backs. Samaje Perine has largely been a non-factor all year after he was touted as, a potential league winner in late rounds that you could get, or even someone like Javonte Williams, who we saw have a bit of a resurgence a few weeks ago, and then he dropped a little bit again. I think there's going to be a heavy emphasis on the running backs. I think it's really going to be Sean Payton kind of ground and pound and play defense over the next few weeks and just kind of survive with Stidham there under center. Although, as you said, it's not much of a downgrade, and Stidham did look decent in his last few games with the Raiders. So it'll be really interesting. But the way I interpreted it, I think the running backs will really benefit here.
For sure. Yeah, Jaleel McLaughlin was more involved last week. He's someone that's probably worked more with the team too. That he's young. I think he benefits a lot too. Because this is Denver. They're just turning the page. They're not worried about trying to make the playoffs at this point. I think Jaleel McLaughlin is another name that gets a stock up.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's the fantasy fallout from the Russ situation. Not a big deal, but big enough to possibly. I mean, these fantasy games, they come down to less than a point. So every decision counts, even your tight end spot, even your kicker spot, defense, all this matters. Y'all got to get every last point we can, because as we see here in the listener league, things can get crazy. Neither matchup was super close in this one. A lot of leagues they are though, but our man Gabe here moving on to the championship against Hank Trill, one of our loyal listeners. His real name is Philip Casey, and we've got to congratulate him because he's our winner of the listener league as far as the prize. Caesar Sportsbook, our great sponsor, shout out to them, official odds partner of bet.nola.com, agreed to give tickets to Saints Falcons, the final week 18 game of the year. Was thinking this fantasy matchup would determine who won those tickets, but since Gabe and I aren't eligible for those tickets, they go to Philip. So congratulations, Philip Casey, Team Latino Heat, our highest finishing listener. He took down William, Team Run CMC, last week to get to the finals, and then Gabe took down Mike to get to the finals there. So yeah, congrats Gabe, congrats Philip. That was fun. That was a fun league, but we've still got one more to go.
Yeah, definitely. Shout out Hank Trill. I know he rocks with us every week on this show. Congrats to him. Looking forward to the championship matchup, and more than anything else, hope he has fun at the Saints game.
Right. Hopefully that game means something. We'll be rooting for the Saints this week against the Bucks. Hopefully that game ends up having some significance there. So I got a couple questions I see. We'll get those answered here before we get to our league winners. Our first Q&A segment, we'll circle back around with a last-minute Q&A to close out the show. But let's get this one in from the original Saints fan here. He has one championship in the money league. Yeah, I'm in that one. I did not make the championship, so I'll answer it. Okay. Your opinions: Mayfield, Murray, or Mullins at QB? I know where I'm going with that. Gibbs, Henry, Jacobs, A-Chain, Chandler, Wilson, Wright. God dang, okay. 2 running backs, 2 receivers, and a flex. Wilson, Rice, Noah Brown, Addison.
I mean, I think we're both in agreement here at the quarterback, Spencer. I think that goes without saying. It's really just an option between the two.
Mullins was benched. Yeah,
Mullins
benched,
getting benched, which we talked about a little bit ago. I think I'd go Mayfield. He's just, he's having a phenomenal year, all things considered. So that's where I would go at quarterback, and I assume you'd agree there.
I'm actually going to go Kyler Murray.
Ooh, okay.
Well, spoiler alert, he's my league-winning quarterback this week because against the Eagles, man, the Eagles' defense is got through the air. I mean, even the Giants were getting stuff going through the air, and they've got a terrible passing game. I know the Cardinals' passing game's been off lately, but Murray's got that rushing floor. He's should have Hollywood Brown back. I think Mayfield's kind of due for a letdown this week. I know the Saints have been struggling, but this is the Saints season. I think they give it their all, and Baker has a little bit of an off week, so it's close. They're both good options, but I'm going to lean Kyler here.
Yeah, no, you definitely make a good point about the Eagles, and Kyler had probably his best game of the season last week, fantasy-wise, so it's not a bad option for sure.
Yep, and then our got to go Gibbs and Henry. That's easy. Those are must starts each and every week. Let's say, yeah, Rashee Rice, probably got to throw him in there. Wilson, I'm not sure who. Oh, Garrett Wilson. Okay. Okay. I'd probably throw in Garrett and Rashee Rice. And then Jacobs, if he plays, yeah, but we don't know. They might just shut him down to where if Jacobs doesn't go, that's a tough deal. I mean, I don't know. A-Chain's been struggling. Addison, I wouldn't trust him. I think I'd go Ty Chandler because they're probably going to want to run the football with that rookie QB. I mean, if Jacobs goes, go him. But I think Chandler could be a sneaky flex against a weak Packers run defense.
Yeah, going Henry is tough considering the matchup that they have. He was terrible a few weeks ago against the Texans. I don't think he'll be as bad this time around. Obviously, he was historically bad the first time, but I don't know if it's hard to trust him after what happened. This is a guy historically who's been so good against this team, but D'Amico Ryans and co seemingly had his number a few weeks ago. So I would almost lean Achane and go with the home run play. But I do agree with you elsewhere with Wilson Rice, and I would go Chandler at the flex. It's it's tough. I think I would lean Henry, but it's going to be a debate in my mind if I would go Henry or Achane in this one.
Yeah, a lot of good options there in what's known as the Beat Billy League. Shout out to Billy Rickman back in Lafayette. So yeah, that's gonna be a fun one. All right, let's get to Nick's question here. 16-team Superflex championship game. Had to roll with Minshew after Richardson went down, and have to play Stidham, Brissett, Zappy, or Jaron Hall as my other QB. Who you got?
I would almost go with Brissett, given how he's looked over the last few weeks. He's officially named the starter there. Jaron Hall's an intriguing one because of the weapons that they have in Minnesota, but I think personally I would lean with Brissett.
Okay, I think I'd lean Stidham against the Chargers. Brissett gets a tough matchup against the 49ers. I know he's looked good, and he's a solid play. Actually, I might go Stidham, Brissett. I don't know if I'd trust Minshew this week. They get the Raiders, who are really tough against opposing QBs, as we saw what they did to Patrick Mahomes last week.
Yeah, for sure. And, Jaron Hall with the weapon, I know we just said we don't trust Addison per se, but obviously Jay Jettis is there. Addison, Ty Chandler, all those guys, you're going to have a lot of options to throw it to.
Yeah, we got to make these tough business decisions here. And a lot of times I tend to lean matchup in these spots because, I mean, none of these guys are proven commodities. None of these guys have been consistent studs throughout the year. So with that being said, I tend to play matchups. I know Minshew's been consistent enough to remain the starter, but for fantasy, he hadn't been anything special. So I don't really see any reason to stay loyal to him. So I think I'd just roll the dice and go Stidham and Brissett.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's see. Henry looks different with Tannehill. Yeah, I mean, I don't think Tannehill's going to go this week, though, because of Will Levis. Will Levis is back healthy this week, Ronald. So I think Henry will. But I don't think that really matters. I mean, he still had some good weeks with Levis. I know you used to him having success with Tannehill, but he was in his prime. He's got a little older now.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, D'Amico, he really showed D'Amico, the defensive head coach of the Texans. He and Matt Burke really schemed against Derrick Henry well. I mean, he was able to do nothing in that first game. I think he set a record for the fewest net yards with 20-plus touches. He had 10 total yards a few weeks ago against the Texans. I don't think this will be quite the defensive battle that we saw a few weeks ago. I think he'll have a little more success, but he's not someone that I would feel good about starting.
For sure. All right, pick 2 PPR. JT, Aaron Jones, Zeke, and James Conner. JT number 1. I'll let Gabe pick number 2.
Yeah, I would probably go Zeke number 2. He's actually looked really good recently, and with Ramondre Stevenson now officially on IR out of the way, I think Zeke's a good play. I don't see a world in which you can trust Aaron Jones in 2023.
Yeah, I feel that. Buffalo's weaker against the run than the pass. Really good pass defense. Run defense about mid-pack. So I see Zeke have another good week. James Conner has a tough matchup against the Eagles. He's been rolling lately, but I think this will be more of a Kyler game. So yeah, give me Zeke. I don't trust Jones either.
Agreed.
Caden, what's up, bro? I've got Keenan, so assuming he's out. Yeah, he didn't practice today. So yeah, I wouldn't trust him to go. So would you start Romeo Dobbs or KJ Osborne? Minnesota just had the news of them changing QBs to start the rookie.
Yeah, I don't know about you, Spencer. I would almost go with KJ Osborne here. With TJ Hawkinson out, they're going to have to look elsewhere. And with Jaron Hall, KJ Osborne just represents that short, to middle range threat. He's almost always open. As we know, I like KJ Osborne a lot, always have. So I would lean Osborne.
Agreed. Yeah, Romeo Dobbs, he was kind of touchdown dependent, and it's showing because lately he has not done well. He had a chance to do really well last week and didn't take advantage because Christian Watson and Jaden Reed were out. So, yeah, I wouldn't trust him in this spot. I don't trust anything to do with Green Bay. That offense is a yo-yo. You never know what they're going to do on a weekly basis. So, yeah, give me KJ Osborne. Minnesota's offense seems like no matter who the QB is, they have at least 2 or 3 guys that are fantasy relevant, which with no Hawkinson, it'll probably be Jefferson, Addison, and Osborne. So, yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
for
good with
sure. And
that.
I mean, as you mentioned, I wouldn't touch Green Bay's offense with a 10-foot pole, especially, with all the young receivers there, with some of them getting back healthy, with their tight end situation uncertain going into the week, with their running backs the way that they are, and with Dontavian Wicks emerging as a target in the passing game. Dobbs just hasn't had as much success this season as we saw last year.
Yep. All right. Would you pick up Flacco and play him over Mayfield or Murray that y'all like? Oh, no, not against the Jets. Terrible matchup. I think Flacco turns back into a pumpkin tonight.
It's the elite cycle of Joe Flacco. He's up here one week and then he's down here the next. So, he threw 3 picks 2 weeks ago, barely beat the Bears. He went for a billion, it seemed, yards against the Texans. And come on, now we're back in that cycle. So, yeah, especially against a tough matchup in the Jets, as you mentioned, I would go Murray or Mayfield over Flacco.
Yep. Because, yeah, we all know the drill with Joe Flacco. He's been around. Yeah, he's been good lately, but don't let recency bias cloud your judgment there. So let's get to our week 17 league winners. So we picked 4 guys at the 4 key positions that we feel are going to be able to lead you to fantasy championships. I'm going with Kyler Murray. I've already talked about why I like him. He's going against the Eagles, who have struggled against even the Giants. That told me the Eagles, they're a mess on defense right now. Matt Patricia is their defensive play caller, y'all. Matt Patricia, they are in trouble on that side of the ball. So give me Kyler Murray this week. I think he has a big week 17. And I know a lot of y'all that have him probably have other options because he hadn't been the most reliable this year. But I think this week he gets it done.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I like that play. Obviously, I said earlier I'd go with Mayfield, but I don't think there's anything wrong with going Kyler Murray, given how the Eagles' defense has struggled. Early in the season, it was, there's a lot of injuries there. But, as those guys get healthy, we're really just seeing their linebacking core and their secondary just isn't the same this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he didn't practice today due to an illness, so keep an eye on that. But I would think he'd be good to go for Sunday. He's experienced. He doesn't really need the practice per se, as long as he's studying and not playing Call of Duty.
Yeah, and we mentioned earlier in the year when he came back, he's playing with a chip on his shoulder. He's trying to prove that he can be the guy there next year as well. So, there's always something to be said for those guys late in the season.
Yep. Running back got Devin Singletary. He's taken over as the Texans' primary back, and he tore up the Tennessee Titans the last time he got to face them, and he gets them again here for week 17. So if you've got Devin Singletary, I feel like he's a great play this week. Keep riding the hot hand.
Yeah, for sure. I'll talk about the Texans a little bit more when we get to my selection, but can't go wrong with picking Motor, who's really emerged as a star running back with the Texans.
Yep, Damian Pierce pretty much out of the way. It seems like it's just kind of a lost season for him. So, yeah, keep riding the motor. I think he'll have another good one against a weak Titans defense. So Brandon Ayuk, my receiver pick. This is an obvious one, going against the Commanders. He's kind of up and down, so I feel like he's somebody that, man, can I trust Ayuk this week? They got Debo and Kittle, CMC, but to me in this matchup, I think they all eat. This will be one. You get a touchdown. You get a touchdown. Everyone gets a touchdown. Brock Purdy's going to bounce back. Don't let last week fool you. Brock is still one of the better QBs. He kind of got exposed as far as, he might not quite be on the level of, there really aren't any elite QBs this year. I mean, maybe because Lamar Jackson, he outplayed him. But I guess it's just one of those things. When going against elite defenses, he might struggle a little bit. But the Commanders are the complete opposite of that. They are the worst defense in the NFL. The stats back it up. So Ayuk, I feel like, is going to have one of his blow-up weeks this week.
Yeah, Riverboat Ron Rivera is just a walking corpse at this point. I think it's a formality. He's going to get fired or pushed into retirement over the next few weeks. I think, as we saw with the 49ers a few weeks ago, as you mentioned, Spencer, everyone is going to eat. And I think Brandon Ayuk, who is one of Brock Purdy's favorite targets, is going to eat as well.
Yep. Dallas Goedert at the tight end position. The Cardinals have been a little better defending the tight end this year. They've been historically bad against the position the past few years, but Gannon's defense maybe been a little better there. But I think Goddard eats them alive, because this is another matchup to where that's another reason why I like Kyler, because they're going to be chasing points. I feel like the Eagles, I think, are going to have their way with the Cardinals, who just, they know Gannon's scheme. He was their DC. So this is one they're not going to be able to throw him any surprise looks, I don't feel like. I think the Eagles roll in this one, and Goddard's someone that's he's steadily been more involved here the past couple of weeks. He had the injury and had been kind of falling off, but for those that have him, if anyone had Hawkinson and he's a tight end, he's a good play. And I think he got dropped in some leagues because he had been struggling and was injured, but he's for those that have him, I feel like he's a very solid play this week. For sure a top 10 play with top 5 upside. So he's someone that I feel like needs to be in pretty much all lineups that have a tight end spot.
Yeah, Spencer, I actually contemplated putting his counterpart on here for my selection. Spoiler, Trey McBride isn't my pick, but I mentioned earlier how weak the Eagles are at linebacker, and you've talked about, I think you hit all the nails on the head about Goddard going against the Cardinals. If you've got either tight end in that matchup, I think you're pretty set.
Yeah, I like McBride as well. He's been the Cardinals' #1 receiver as of late with their receiving core banged up. So let's move on to Gabe's league winner, C.J. Stroud at QB's clear concussion protocol, hoping to lead the Texans to the playoffs.
Yeah, here's the thing. Not only do I see the Texans as a team who's going to come out as if they were fired out of a cannon with Stroud coming back. I mean, we just saw Case Keenum throw for 229 yards against the Titans the other week in Nashville. I think NRG Stadium is going to be rocking next week. Texans need this win to get into the playoffs. CJ Stroud gets his targets back. This one just seems like a no-brainer to me. When he got injured, he was up there among the leading passers in the league. I don't think he'll have missed a beat. I think he'll get right back to it. 2 weeks off with a concussion. I think he's motivated. I think he's ready, and I really like his matchup this week against Tennessee.
For sure. And Bijan at running back. Tough matchup against the Bears, but I guess you see the Bijan train staying steady here. He had a good week last week.
Yeah, here's the thing. The Falcons are not going to run the ball very well. And if they are, I think it's going to be Tyler Algier who's going to do well. I think where Bijan Robinson is going to kill the Bears defense is through the air. I mean, this is a guy, if you get him the ball in open space, he will kill you. And I think, Arthur Smith has finally realized that. He had a big performance last week. I think he's going to follow it up here against the Bears. This is a must-win for the Falcons. And in these must-win situations, you've got to get the ball to your playmakers.
Yep. So, Bijan should do well there. And then Devontae Adams against the Colts, who they've been a little better against the pass, so a young secondary. I'm guessing you see Adams having success there.
Yeah, we talked earlier about the Joe Flacco elite cycle. This is another cycle. Devontae Adams has a bad week. Devontae Adams bounces back in a big way, and I think it's going to be no different here this week. You know, he really struggled, and if we're being honest, anyone who watches it knows the entire Raiders offense struggled against the Kansas City Chiefs last week. He gets a much better matchup in Indy's defense, who got torched last week. I think Devontae Adams, who had 6 targets, you know, the targets are going to be there. Aiden O'Connell is going to be desperate to bounce back after not completing a pass for the final 3 quarters last week. Devontae Adams is his obvious target. And I think they might have to throw the ball a little more if Josh Jacobs still isn't healthy. So I like Devontae Adams to bounce back. I think almost every week, if not every week, that he's had a single-digit performance, he's bounced back with double digits. So I like that trend to continue here.
Yeah, Raiders passing game can't be any worse than it was last week. So, yeah, definitely see Devontae bouncing back. And then Jake Ferguson at home against the Lions, that's got shootout written all over it.
Yeah, you know, it's got shootout written all over it. And this is a guy who scored touchdowns for fun in the middle of the season. He's really only scored 1 against the Seahawks. But, you know, at home, the Cowboys offense is just a different beast. And at home, he's been pretty good. He's put up multiple 70-yard performances. Hasn't found the end zone in the last 3 weeks. I think that changes this week. I really like Jake Ferguson. I really like this matchup for them. I think the Cowboys are going to struggle to run the ball. And, you know, when they throw the ball, especially when you get down into the red zone, Jake Ferguson is a guy you have to watch out for.
100%. Yeah, he's been the number 2 there this year. I mean, because CD's done really well, but Brandon Cooks hadn't really been very good this year. I think he's kind of lost a step, and Michael Gallup's never really been the same since his knee injury from a couple years ago. So, yeah, Jake Ferguson, definitely a good play this week, I feel like, against the Lions defense that's very vulnerable through the air.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, y'all. So thank y'all for watching. It's been the Fantasy Roundup presented by Caesar Sportsbook. Before we go, we're going to have our final Fantasy Roundup Q&A of 2023. So anyone with championship questions, speak now. This is your last chance to get them in. And we've already got one here from Jonathan. Shout out to Jonathan here. Pick the best 3 this week between Montgomery, Walker, I guess and that's Ken Walker, Ty Chandler, Aaron Jones, and CEH.
Yeah, you know, I'll kick this one back to you, Spencer, here in a second. I think this is easy for me. I think it's the first 3 you listed. I just you can't trust CEH, especially with Pacheco potentially healthy, getting back into the mix there. And Aaron Jones, like I said, you just don't want to trust anything about the Green Bay offense. I think Chandler's been pretty good as the feature back. I think Kenneth Walker is really put up a few good weeks since he came back from injury. He's always a threat to break off a big one or find the end zone. And even though Montgomery's got a tough matchup, I think he's got a higher upside than Aaron Jones or CEH this week.
For sure. I'll go ahead and rank them. I'll go rank Walker first going against Pittsburgh. They've got a pretty stingy defense, but as Gabe mentioned, Walker, when healthy, is very reliable. And he didn't practice yesterday, but I think that was just a maintenance day. As long as he practices the next 2 days, he'll be a go. He's an RB1 when he's right, so make sure he's in there if healthy. Ty Chandler would probably be my number 2. I'm starting to warm up to the idea of playing Ty Chandler with the news of his rookie starting. I feel like that tells me Minnesota's going to want to probably run the ball more. And so Green Bay's defense kind of weak against the run. So to me, Chandler's a solid RB2. And then for this 3rd spot, I mean, yeah, Aaron Jones and CEH might have a little more upside than Montgomery because it's looking like Pacheco is probably going to be out. He suffered that bad concussion on Monday. But you know what, man? Monty is so consistent in that offense. To me, you got to go with him. I think that game's going to be high scoring. And Monty usually always, even if he doesn't rack up a lot of yards, always seems to find the end zone. So I think he's good for about 50, 60 yards and a touchdown. Jones, you never know what you're going to get, as Gabe mentioned. And CEH, even with no Pacheco, just hard to trust, man. The Chiefs, our offense is off right now. Plus, I think this would be more of a Mahomes game. Bengals defense kind of vulnerable. Just all around. They're not quite as sharp on defense this year. So I think the Mahomes-Kelsey duo gets going. And just, I mean, we know the drill with CEH. He's not a reliable fantasy option. So, yeah, I'm with Gabe on this. The Montgomery, well, ranked in our Walker, Chandler, Montgomery.
And let's be honest, Spencer, one more point on Montgomery. Everyone wants to kind of shy away from that, looking at the matchup. They get Dallas. But, I mean, when has Dan Campbell ever seemed like a guy to shy away from a matchup? He seems like the kind of coach where he says, all right, Dallas is strong against the run. Let's run the football down their throats. And I think Montgomery's the perfect running back for a coach like that.
Yeah, they seem pretty matchup proof. Even against tough matchups, they can still run it. So, yeah, not scared off by that.
Try.
I mean, the Bills ran it down Dallas's throat with James Cook. So what's to say the Lions can't do it? They've got arguably the best running game in the league with Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. So, all right, well, I think that's going to do it. Any questions? Going once, going twice. Sold. That's the end of this Fantasy Roundup episode, Championship Edition. Appreciate everyone that rocked with us. It was really fun. We've supposed to be off today, but we still rocking here, doing this thing. Had to come with the heat for the Fantasy Championship week, and we're going to have even more heat for y'all, especially for those in the sports betting. We've got Bayou Bets coming right around the corner today at 4 o'clock with Jim Derry and Thomas Casale, and all four of us are going to be live tomorrow for the bowl season special. We're going to be previewing the CFP and some other bowl matchups tomorrow at 3, I believe. Right, Gabe?
Yep, 3 o'clock.
Yep, the Bayou Bets Bowl special, along with our big bucks picks. And thankfully, I'm not the turkey this week after my 0-5 disaster. Got back on track this past week, so we're glad about that. But for Gabe Henderson, this is Spencer the Guru Urquhart. Thank you all for watching the Fantasy Roundup here on the Bayou Bets YouTube channel. Subscribe, y'all, if y'all haven't already. Thank y'all, and happy holidays. Peace out.